Okay, welcome everybody. Super great to see you all here today. Today we're going to be discussing quantum consciousness, OR, IIT, all the drama that's been going on Twitter for some time now, for probably about the last 2 weeks. It's important for me to do this video because I've been involved in consciousness studies and research for probably like 12 years. If it weren't for consciousness specific people in the community, I wouldn't have ever gotten into ultrasound in the first place. So this is an important discussion for me to have, and I just got to get that video up here on the internet, and I think will be the most recent and probably the most fair video to the discussion, since I'm not coming in this with a financial backing or bias, and I will probably point out where there are some financial incentives that are behind the scenes that are driving some pretty, I think, reprehensible behavior from some of the other parties in this situation. So, but before we do that, I always love to do what's called the simultaneous squeeze, which is a breathing practice we do to get everybody kind of like on the same page and kind of like center ourselves. So just follow my instructions as we go. So what you're gonna do is take a deep breath in. 1, 2, 3. Take a sip of air at the top, hold it and squeeze. And slowly exhale. And there we go. And we feel a little bit different from it, don't we? So, all right. So where do we start? I'm just going to post this here into the Facebook chat so you guys can have a kind of a rolling timeline. All right. Oops. Oh my gosh. Okay. Okay. So what we're dealing with right now is basically there's a very heated debate taking place in the consciousness studies community over on Twitter/X.com. And it's mostly among neuroscientists. Recently, the spat began when 124 neuroscientists, preeminent scientists in the field of consciousness studies, all signed a paper written by Hakwon Liu and other co-collaborators, that basically pointed out that a particular theory called IIT, or Integrated Information Theory, was basically pseudoscience, no better than a pseudoscientific fake science, which got a ton of people really, really upset. And a bunch of people that were basically being funded by IIT's, funding mechanisms, got on Twitter and started threatening people who wrote the paper and who signed the paper, and threatening them both personally and professionally, which kind of like drew them out of the shadows and got the conversation started. So that's kind of where we're starting from, right? This happened about a few weeks ago. Now, in the ensuing controversy, what we're seeing here is that, this has certainly opened up a huge and important discussion around what is IIT, what is Integrated Information Theory, why was it being hailed as the preeminent leading theory of the theory of consciousness, which is an important it's an important hill to be on top of. Now, IIT has been hailed as a major theory of consciousness. It has many advocates in academia and in science. Although the advocates will often claim to the media, to the New York Times, to major publications, the New Scientist, Wired.com, TechCrunch, anybody and anyone with a science byline in a newspaper or a magazine or an online blog has been told by a few people, David Chalmers, Anil Seth, these are some names that people on Twitter will know, that IIT is the most written about theory in the world. It's the leading theory among researchers, although they always fail to mention that more than 50% of the papers written about IIT are all in objection to the methods of IIT. So they'll always claim, oh, this is the most discussed theory of consciousness. They never mention how many of those discussions are making real objections to the basically fake projections, fake predictions that IIT is claiming to make. This is a pretty serious allegation that was then continually ignored. So in light of years and years of constant pushback against IIT, the people basically benefiting from IIT, Chalmers and Anil Seth and Liad and lots of other names associated with this, you can just Google them, Christoph Koch, different people, would still go to the media and say, oh, no, IIT is still the number one theory. It is the winning theory. This got to such a point where these 124 neuroscientists all said, like, time out, you guys. We got to put a paper together that finally puts it out there that this actually is pseudoscience. So it was a pretty major move. And a lot of people were like, that's not science. And what I'm really saying here is that the practices that were already in play by IIT proponents and advocates wasn't scientific in the first place. Here's why. In one way, these figures, Chalmers and Anil K. Seth, basically intentionally ignored or banned from discussion at their own conferences, which claim to be associations for the discussion of conscious theories, literally banned the discussion entirely of alternative, most likely way more extensive theories of consciousness. In particular, the other theory that is like so snuffed here, which is very unfair and totally ridiculous, and you'll hear why, is called orchestrated objective reduction, ORC-OR. ORC-OR is a theory created in 1996 by Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. It's called the ORC-OR Penrose-Hameroff interpretation. This basically states that consciousness is connected to cytoskeletal microtubules in the human brain where there are quantum collapses of superposition states. So it's basically showing that there are quantum effects happening in the brain that give rise to higher states of consciousness, and that there's lots of underlying science that got them to the mathematical, the physics, the testable hypotheses, the falsifiability of the theory, etc. Now, I'll give you a clear-cut example. 1 year ago to today, or to this month, basically, David Chalmers, who is like one of the biggest, perpetrators of this grand ignorance snuffing of alternative theories of consciousness that aren't IIT, gave a presentation to a large conference called Quantum Consciousness, exploring theories of consciousness that involve quantum effects. He used the entire 30-minute video to promote and talk about IIT, and not a single time in the entire video, I reviewed it twice, did he ever mention ORC-OR, microtubules, pi resonance, anesthesia, didn't mention Roger Penrose, didn't mention Stuart Hameroff, although he did mention other names and other theories that talked about quantum effects in relationship to consciousness. But he literally, it was like, if you've read the books or seen the movies, Harry Potter, there's one name that you never say, Voldemort, right? It's like David Chalmers is treating this whole theory, orchestrated objective reduction, ORC-OR, as Voldemort, the forbidden science, apparently, the thing that you cannot say. Not mentioning it, it's a much more robust theory of consciousness, but it's so clear cut that these guys are categorically snuffing, ignoring, and outright banning the discussion of Orch from their conferences on consciousness. Now, Stuart Hameroff, thankfully, has run his own uh, Towards the Science of Consciousness event I believe, every year, both in the United States and worldwide, to discuss wide-ranging theories of consciousness, including IIT, GNW, Orch, as well as many other options for theories of consciousness. So Stuart Hameroff has actually been very fair to all theories of consciousness. At the ASSC, which is the other, Association for the Science of Consciousness event, no speakers proposing Orch or discussing it were allowed at all. The only reason he gave was that basically for the theories of consciousness to spread, we should have 1,000 flowers blooming all over in different ways. It's like, no, dude, this is a preeminent theory. There aren't that many. It's obviously one of the best, and you're outright banning it and bullying the people who are studying it today. So it is actually ridiculous. I think any observer can see clearly, categorically, that Chalmers and Anil Seth are absolutely and intentionally not addressing the Orch question. Now, here's another example of Anil Seth. He wrote a review of the major theories of consciousness, of how the brain works and generates consciousness, that was in Nature publications, Nature Neuroscience, just about a year and a half ago. Okay? Now, in that paper, the 4 major theories of consciousness that were presented were IIT, GNW, and 2 other interrelated, kind of in that approximate area of theories of consciousness. Now, we know that recently, as I said before, 124 neuroscientists all put their name on a paper that literally headlines IIT is pseudoscience. And Anil Seth included that as like one of the top theories of consciousness, ignoring years of objection to that being included in major research and academia, etc. Now, when I asked him, where's Orch in that paper, you basically just didn't even mention orchestrated objective reduction. He said, oh no, I did. It occupies one single line in a large table of multiple theories of consciousness. I said, Orch is penned by Sir Roger Penrose, a preeminent physicist nobody can impeach the expertise of Roger Penrose. He's not some weirdo. He's a world-renowned physicist. He proposed quantum superpositions that would be involved in consciousness. And Stuart Hameroff is an anesthesiologist, a world-renowned anesthesiologist who's spoken at every major anesthesiology conference. He's been a practicing anesthesiologist for all of his career. He's just as unimpeachable as anyone else. Orch has been around since 1996, has falsifiable propositions, things that you could actually go and test in a lab, and that they have been tested and have yet been unfalsified. This is a key thing in research, in the scientific method, is if you're going to propose a theory of how things work, you also need to include in it things that you can use to prove that it's not true. That's a key thing here. Now, IIT basically has no such falsifiable propositions. It just says, this is true, and nanny nanny boo boo if you try to prove us wrong. There's no way you can disprove it, right? That'd be like saying, wizards and shamans and gnomes run the planet. And I would say, well, how could I test that? And they said, well, you can't. It's just, look, the math shows that's true. In Orch, it's proposing a mechanism of where consciousness is happening physically in the brain, how you can modify it with anesthesia, etc., right? Hence, Stuart Hameroff, being an anesthesiologist, does know quite a bit about someone who comes in the operating room as a conscious person. They're exposed to a certain select amount of an anesthetic gas or liquid in their bloodstream, or through oxygen mask or through anesthesia gas, and their consciousness decreases measurably so, predictably so. And then it comes back when the gases vent off. So there are testable predictions in OrchOR. When I further asked Anil Seth on Twitter, why did then OrchOR, which is a very well-respected theory of consciousness, it's been spoken about for decades now, came out in 1996, why did it get one single line in a table at the tail end of your paper? And why did IIT take prominence over everything else, when now we know that many people have been yelling basically that this is total bunk pseudoscience? His reasoning, this is literally what he said. I have a screenshot, I have receipts. Anil Seth's reason for why he couldn't speak any further on OrchOR other than OrchOR, Hameroff, Penrose on a single line in a table, even though there are plenty of published papers, lots of discussion about the theory, he said he didn't have enough room, not enough space in the paper. Oh, there's not enough. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were writing this on a stone tablet in the year 2022. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that a New York Times contributor couldn't somehow afford a computer with more than a few megabytes of memory to be able to add a paragraph, no, yea, not a sentence of any information or reference to OrchOR. That is his words. He didn't have the space on a paper published to Nature Neuroscience with no limits on how many pages you can submit. Okay? That he didn't have enough space. And you tell me that there's some fairness going on here, that things are being treated with any scientific rigor here at all, is bullshit. It's absolute bullshit. And when you go on Twitter and you tag these people and you ask them, they continue to ignore it. They continue to ignore it. And Stuart Hameroff himself is on Twitter, right? I wouldn't even, honestly, my opinions here are, if somebody that created the theory isn't even willing to go in public and defend it and talk about it, then who am I to even discuss it, right? Stuart Hameroff is on there every day having that discussion, bringing up points, and yet they continue to treat it as, oh, well, we're not going to go there, okay? It's literally bullshit. Yeah, Sarah, you got it. Definitely fevered egos that are either afraid or unwilling to actually have that discussion that I think is important. And then here's the kicker. Here's the real bullshit kicker. Is that essentially in doing this, they're basically claiming that the fallout from the pseudoscience paper signed by 124 of their colleagues and peers, people that work in there, literally people who work for David Chalmers in his organization, put their names on that paper. They weren't afraid at the serious implications for professional retribution to put their names on that paper. That's a pretty serious thing to say. Is that, oh no, this is like, literally quote from David Chalmers, this is like an atomic bomb on the whole field of consciousness. Because here's what's going to happen, as they say, is that it's going to make everybody in the public think that now the theory of consciousness is threatened because now there is no good theory of consciousness. And I say, you created that problem, Anil and David and you guys who have ignored and shunned and banned, literally banned, any discussion of Orch, which is actually pretty damn strong. If you actually do read or listen or learn, if people are actually exposed to the Orch theory of consciousness, which is very strong, has actually falsifiable components to it, then guess what? People go, wow, that's pretty darn compelling. I would be interested in learning more about this. But since you guys have only propped up IIT as the leading theory of consciousness, now when it comes to people saying, hold up, we've been warning people about this for years and years, and it gets published that leading theory of consciousness gets called out as pseudoscience, yeah, of course, it makes the entire field seem like on uneven ground because of what you guys did. You created the problems that you're now complaining about existing. If you're a farmer and you grow crops and you never try to diversify the plant that you're putting in the ground and growing, it's called monoculture, monocropping. So it's a thing that farmers deal with all the time. And one virus or one bug or one pest comes into your farm and really has a delicious taste for that one plant that you put in the ground, and it destroys the entire field. Whose fault is that exactly? Could you not say that it was the farmer himself or herself that wasn't thinking ahead proactively, that, maybe I should listen to the people warning about this, that this is a weak vegetable to plant in the ground? This shouldn't come as a shock that IIT has very shaky basis for what it's claiming. It's not like, oh no, how could we have possibly known? No, like I said, they on one hand will go to the media and claim that IIT is the most talked about theory in the world. And they'll not mention that over 50% of those papers are telling us that IIT is basically bullshit. But still, it's the number one talked about theory. It's because you guys are pushing it, and that's how you get, that's the discussion. That's the scientific discussion. Nobody signed a paper that claimed IIT was pseudoscience without really thinking hard about the implications and the repercussions that could happen. Nobody that signed that paper did so thinking like one step ahead. They're like, this is a pretty serious accusation. But it's the only thing that they could do to actually get the attention of these bigger dudes who are basically just ignoring and banning the discussion of any other conscious theory of consciousness. So yeah, you guys created the problem that you're now whining about existing by not planting diverse ideas in the minds of the population. Anil Seth is a contributor to the New York Times, I believe. He's a writer that's been published in Nature Review. He is responsible for educating the general populace about these theories of consciousness. He is categorically misled readers by the nature of not including theories, including in a one single table at the end of your paper, the word Orch is not including a discussion about Orch, okay? If you give pages and pages of attention to IIT, which had obvious known flaws to it, and then when pressed, why couldn't you give a sentence, dude, a paragraph about Orch? I don't know if is he not comfortable discussing that there could be quantum effects in the brain? There are quantum effects happening in proteins, in enzymes that we know of. There's obvious quantum effects are a well-known phenomena in reality. It's not like quantum things aren't happening. Quantum things are happening right now. It's a question of, are there quantum things happening that have anything to do with human consciousness? And there is compelling science and mathematical physics that does point to that being the case. But Anil didn't have enough space on his little dinky laptop to write one paragraph about OR. Why is that? Okay, let's talk about why OR is being sidelined, okay? And I see your comment, TK, here. Not taking responsibility for the predictable fallout they themselves created. Perfect way to put it. That's exactly what's happening. They're not only taking responsibility, they're not taking responsibility for the scenario that we now find ourselves in. And then they're complaining about it and telling the people who penned that paper that it's their fault that this happened. No, it's your guys' fault that you created the climate of ignoring this stuff. You guys created this problem as well. Again, it's just shirking responsibility, shirking their duty to science is presenting actual, real, testable theories. They'll talk all day about panpsychism, about how consciousness pervades every single thing in the world. They'll get like, oh, that my table right here, a rock, physical piece of volcanic rock, that consciousness flows through everything. They'll talk about that. But when you're like, okay, there's a physical location in the brain that has quantum effects in microtubules, in tubulin, and there's a testable, quantifiable, and falsifiable model for how that arises to human consciousness. But Anil couldn't be bothered to give it more than one line in a little dinky table in his massive paper reviewing all theories of consciousness, and when pressed on it, he didn't have enough space on his computer, you guys. Oh, okay. Well, I guess then, who are we to judge, right? Now, why is this happening, okay? If I've learned anything over the last 10 years of working not only in academia, right? Because my background is actually working in a academic setting, in a hospital, providing actual biomedical physical hardware to get IRB approved through investigational devices for biomedical research on the human brain to modify how your circuitry works in your brain with ultrasound. So I've worked in this space. We've had funding come from DARPA, from the Pentagon, from the Department of Defense, from the Army, from the National Institutes of Mental Health, the National Institutes of Health, the National Science Foundation. We've received grants from those funding bodies, both public and private. Okay? So I've worked in that field. I know how the cookie crumbles. Ignoring the potential financial implications here, right? Never ignore the financial aspect of why things are incentivized the way that they are. I want to wait on that for a second because I see TK wrote professional jealousies, okay? Absolutely possible. If you learn anything about academia, while they will herald, we are academics, we live by science. As much as I would love to believe that, there's 100% room for bickering, politics, jealousies, all kinds of dumb human bullshit pervades science today. Okay, it's not just like men in lab coats just being objective and rational all the time. So there's clearly something going on that dimension. But if we also look at so definitely asterisk there. The reason for snuffing OR has zero basis in any scientific reasoning. They've not given any reason for why it would be tabled like that. There's nothing in their discussion that gives any reason for why OR is so snuffed and ignored and why it got banned from the consciousness association that happened in New York last year. And I think it was October, a year ago. No reason given, just done, but it happened. Now, financially speaking, yeah, money trumps all. Money, looking at the money dimension here, I think there's something to it, right? I don't know who's funding Chalmers and Anil. I'm sure they have different diverse funding methods, but it would be, I would predictably bet something, right? At least some claim here. And I'm just going to say allegedly is that there's potentially a financial incentive for the snuffing of these other theories. Now, my proposal here is this, is that the sidelining of OR may be due to a simple lack of understanding, that they just don't have I don't think that they lack the cognitive capacity to understand OR. It's not that complicated. Of course, there is some pretty high-level physics going on. There's some pretty intense math that can be involved. But intuitively, and just if you understand what the proposal is, you can go, okay, I can make sense of it. At least I can make sense of it. And I have a professional relationship with Dr. Stuart Hammeroff anyway. So I've spent hours and hours of time personally speaking with him on these things. So I might have a more privileged understanding than the average person. So I completely can acknowledge that privilege there. But alternatively and more worrying is the financial incentives may be from some hidden forces who intentionally want to mislead the public and the media on theories of consciousness for an intentional reason. And that these forces may aim to create a false narrative of what the leading theory of consciousness is, for the reason of putting a narrative out there that ignores what the human mind is truly capable of. Because once you start to acknowledge that there could be a quantum aspect to human cognition, you begin to realize how much more potential human minds have, how much more intensely powerful our cognitive capability could be. If there's a quantum spark in our minds, it could give us potential for free will. It could give us potential for processing massive amounts of data that most people don't believe that they can have, that they can learn things really quickly, that you could literally visually learn things and problem solve like almost instantaneously, that the brain is some like rudimentary rote ones and zero machine is the old school way. And there's a financial incentive to keep people in the dark about that. IIT does not really provide much explanatory mechanisms for how consciousness works. So it really is puzzling why it would be considered the leading theory of consciousness when it proposes no such mechanism of where it's happening, whereas OR is pretty clear on paper as to what the hell is going on with consciousness. It makes sense. Smart people have discussed it. Nobody yet has falsified it. People have spent time trying. People have invested millions of dollars to try and falsify OR, and they have failed so far. Just like you could probably try to falsify the theory of gravity. If you could find an instance where if I take, let's say this, I have a poker chip here I always keep on my desk. If you could find an instance where I drop this and it floats to the ceiling, that would be a falsification of what we know to be the theory of gravity. But I'm going to predict that it's going to fall down to my other hand right here. Yep, it did it. And I could do that 10,000 times, and it's very likely to fall down. That's sort of basically what the theory of gravity says. OR has similar testable predictions. If you could show me something that completely blows that theory out of the water, then we would have to say OR has been officially falsified. Let's move on. If you present a theory that doesn't have such that really doesn't have anything that you can test, it's all just math, and they talk about phi, this like ominous like thing called phi, which is just like kind of bullshit. Basically, IIT can lead you to say that A thermometer in your wall is conscious because it's calculating information. It's integrated information theory. The tighter you pack information into a ball, then you have the emergence of consciousness, is what IIT promotes. But it's all kinds of messed up. Honestly, just look at the paper. 124 neuroscientists, leading academics in the study of consciousness, all put their name on a paper saying that IIT is pseudoscience. Go look at the Wikipedia. Now, it says IIT has been claimed to be a pseudoscience. But yet, Anil, a year ago, was like, this is the leading theory of consciousness, even though that's not the first time it's been accused of that. So anyway, the incentives, I think, are way more perverse than I think are being spoken about. Now, I'm just going to say allegedly, because I don't have any evidence of that, but we all know as human beings that hidden financial incentives exist in every industry all over the world. It works in medicine and academia. And what you say is the leading theory of consciousness, even though your colleagues say this is bullshit. And yet you continue to do it. And then in the discussion, you still don't even mention OR. That's really fucked up. That's really fucked up that the response to the pseudoscience accusation is no real reflection to say, let's go back to the science when you've been practicing no such thing that appears to be scientific methodology whatsoever before, during, and after as of right now. Nothing that I see as an observer and as somebody that's in the theory of consciousness, as an actual player in the field of modulating human consciousness with ultrasound, I see no such practice of actual science. You guys aren't actually building anything practical. You're not leading to any developments of technology or therapeutics with IIT. OR actually is. OR, that created by Penrose Hameroff, led to the intuition that ultrasound itself would modulate microtubule activity and modulate consciousness. This was tested by Hameroff back in 2013, 2014. It was tested to be true, and that's led to now the development of many companies doing ultrasound therapies for neuromodulation all over the world. From that one paper in 2013 by Stuart Hameroff himself. I see no such thing for IIT, and I see zero reason for ignoring it and banning the discussion of OR. You guys are clearly not practicing anything that resembles science, even at a rudimentary level. A kid in middle school today, well, at least many decades ago when I was in middle school, what I learned about science, I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing something that appears to be some perverse hidden incentive that's either a personal grudge and or at worst some kind of a hidden financial game that's being played. And they certainly did complain a lot about, oh my God, you're gonna affect our funding for IIT if you publish this paper. So they certainly didn't ignore the financial impacts that might have, but also they didn't acknowledge the financial impacts that their bullshittery has had on the funding of OR. So they're not willing to acknowledge that it goes both ways. So anyway, yes, follow the money. Exactly. Right? So in conclusion, basically the recent Twitter/X.com spat among neuroscientists reveals a deeper issue within the consciousness studies community. It highlights the need for open discussion and fair representation of all theories, not just those that are currently popular or financially backed, either in public or in secret. And only then can we hope to truly understand the complex nature of human consciousness. If you guys continue to ignore OR, then you're going to continue to basically do the equivalent of shooting yourselves in the feet and then whining that you can't walk anymore. Okay? It's obvious. I'm just feedbacking what I see as a observer of the discussion here on the internet. This is clear as day to me. I'm not one to believe in a bunch of bullshit. I'm not one to not be a skeptic observer of things. I'm not being intentionally obtuse here. I don't stand to gain either way. If IIT is the leading theory of consciousness or OR is the leading theory of consciousness, it literally makes no difference in my day-to-day life. I'm not asking for academic funding to study OR or IIT or anything like that. So I have no incentive to do any of this stuff. But as a professional colleague in this area, I think it's important to make this video and put it out there for whoever will either look back in a few months or in a year from now to say, hey, at least there were a few people who are giving the full picture, because even then in the fallout of this, they're still doing the same bullshit that got them in this situation in the first place. They're only willing to discuss IIT. They're like holding their like dead corpse of IIT and not being any more self-reflective, not even asking, well, what could we have done to avoid this? Avoiding the public fallout could have been avoided by saying, hey, IIT is not the only game in town. There's also some pretty amazing stuff called OR. Have you guys heard of this? We'd love to tell you about that too. As people who are communicators of science theories of consciousness, wouldn't you think that that's probably what they should have been doing? And yet, no mention of OR in any presentation by David Chalmers, literally talking about quantum consciousness. OR is the leading theory that has anything to do with any quantum effects of consciousness. So that's outright bullshit. And then the whole excuse that Anil gave, I didn't have, what do you mean? I didn't have space on my computer. This is how I think of Anil basically now, by him saying this. Oh, widow me, I didn't have space on my computer. I couldn't have enough megabytes on my Word document to put a couple sentences about OR. This guy's a fucking professional that runs a lab in the UK on consciousness. Bullshit, you didn't have enough room. Fucking A. Jesus Christ. Did you read your tweet before you sent it? Did you read that, Anil, at all? What do you mean you didn't have enough space on a digital document? What the fuck, man? This is ridiculous. It is actually categorically absurd. For you guys to now call for, let's return to the science. There's been no such thing that's been happening. You're not returning to the science. You never were in the science in the first place. You haven't been treating this as an actual discussion of science. You've been picking a side and brutally pushing it and pushing out any other non-IIT idea at the expense of all of us. And this is why they wrote a paper having to call IIT pseudoscience. That's what you get. You FAFO. And there was some meme from the Big Lebowski's like, this is what you get when you fuck strangers in the ass. Okay? That's what you get, right? And that will be the asterisk on IIT forever. Forever. You can try to modulate it as much as you can, but it's not going to work. Okay? So, with that being said, that will be my contribution to this discussion. Thank you guys so much for watching. Should you have any questions or anything like that, definitely reply to this video on Twitter. Would love to see your feedback. Or, Anil, David, you guys, you could just continue to ignore it, as you will continue to do, I'm sure. Okay. So, but I'm open to having a discussion, as we're all willing to have the discussion. Let's like you say, go back to the scientific discussion here, right? So anyway, the video's out there now. Cat's out of the bag. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll see you again tomorrow. We'll get back to our normal scheduled content on the vagus nerve and how to stimulate it and how to live a great life, and all that fun stuff. So thanks guys for watching. Thanks for all the new subscribers. I see them flowing in through YouTube, so I appreciate that. And awesome. Thanks, guys, for watching. Thanks for bearing through this one today. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, TK. And I'll see you guys soon. Okay? Take care of yourselves, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace out. Bye-bye.